Amir, we had booked you to talk about your very compelling book, The Gates of Gaza, about what your family went through on October 7th as that one-year anniversary approaches, and your own family, your father, had to rescue you from your kibbutz as it was attacked. We'll get to that in just a moment, but I do have to ask you about the breaking news this hour. Prime Minister Netanyahu cutting his trip to New York short, heading back to Israel upon this news of the IDF targeting Hassan Nasrallah. We have yet to know whether or not he was assassinated. Your reaction?
Yeah, we're trying to gather information. And right now what we're hearing is a bit of a contrast from sources in Israel that sound cautiously optimistic about this, but nothing official yet. Just some rumors masqueraded as briefings to reporters, if that's the way I can put it. And then a mirror picture of that coming from a little bit of the Lebanese media and outlets in the Arab world that are now reporting based on their sources that Nasrallah was not killed. But I really think we should all be a little patient here and wait for something more authoritative to emerge. It's clear that he was the target. It's clear that if he was there, just based on the pictures and the magnitude of the dynamite that exploded over there, that the chances to survive such an attack are not high. But I think it's not a coincidence that we are not getting any official statement from either side right now whether this Israeli strike succeeded in eliminating Nasrallah, which would be Israel's really greatest achievement in this ongoing battle with Hezbollah that we've been living through for almost a year now, since they began firing on Israel on October 8th, or whether it did not succeed. And then, of course, a big question would be, what will Hezbollah do in retaliation?
Well, and that is yet to be determined, and a lot of this obviously lying in whether or not Hassan Nasrallah was indeed assassinated here. The Israeli argument, the IDF's case that they're trying to portray to the world, is that this is their way of escalating to de-escalate, to avoid another massive, large-scale ground war. Do you think that this is an effective strategy in terms of getting there, in terms of avoiding what we saw in 2006?
Well, it's a little too early to judge, but it's surely a high-risk strategy. Because if it works, then basically you would see Hezbollah accepting the Israeli demand to detach the Lebanese arena from what's happening in Gaza. And let's say that, just judging on the merits, the Israeli demand on this makes a lot of sense, because Israel did not attack Hezbollah on October 8th. Hezbollah attacked Israel. Right after Hamas launched its attack on Israel on October 7, Israel, like any other country would do, chose to retaliate and strike back at Hamas in Gaza. And that's when Hezbollah, completely without any justification on their behalf, began to attack Israel. It wasn't like Israel, first of all, went after Hezbollah in Lebanon. And so what the Israeli side has been saying all this time is, we don't accept this linkage that Nasrallah had created, that he's going to fire on Israel as long as the war in Gaza continues. And if this Israeli strategy were to prove itself, we would see Hezbollah agreeing to such a step, to basically stop the fighting in Lebanon, regardless of what happens in Gaza. But there's a risk that this strategy could also lead to the opposite result, which is Hezbollah continuing and intensifying its attacks, and perhaps Iran joining as well, because of the amount of the hits that Hezbollah, a very important project for the Iranian regime, has been taking in the last 2 weeks.
And as we heard, Hassan Nasrallah even acknowledging the significant blow that the last few weeks has been on Hezbollah. But Amir, just in terms of what we saw and heard from Fawaz, is saying that in his view, Prime Minister Netanyahu wants an endless war, because he's not the only one saying this. It's many Israelis say that whether it's the war in Gaza and perhaps opening a new front in the north, this is his way of remaining in power. It's a very cynical view, obviously, but I'm just wondering, from an Israeli perspective, are the majority of Israelis, are they willing to see another full-on war in the north at this point? Are they prepared?
I think what the majority of Israelis want is a solution to two issues. One of them is the return of our hostages from Gaza, where we still have 100 people in the hands of the enemy, dozens of them considered to be alive, and a safe return to their homes of tens of thousands of Israelis who have been forced to evacuate from the border with Lebanon due to Hezbollah's attacks. If those two issues can be achieved via a diplomatic solution that will include the release of the hostages in Gaza and Hezbollah withdrawing from the border with Israel, moving backwards north into Lebanon, and then giving a sense of security to Israelis living in the north to come back to their homes, then I think the vast majority of the population would want to avoid a war, because achieving at least the second goal, the return of the people to their homes in the north via a war, would be very costly. If it involves a ground invasion, there could be a lot of soldiers killed in this war. And in Israel, this means that this would touch on everybody. So a war is not a good choice. It may be a necessity if there's no other way. And we are seeing this diplomatic effort right now led by the United States and France and other countries to try to find, again, this holy grail of Middle East diplomacy at the moment, this agreement that in one stroke would end the war in Gaza, release the hostages, and end the fighting in the north. And from the Israeli side, ending the war in the north would have to include some kind of withdrawal by Hezbollah from the borderline, because otherwise people will be asked to go back to a reality in which Hezbollah is watching over their homes and preparing to attack them, and this is something that's unacceptable.
That is Hezbollah upholding its end of the bargain in Resolution 1701 after the war in 2006, where they would remain north of the Litani River, which they, we all noted.
But it would have to be
violated.
Implemented.
Yes, it would have to be implemented, yes.
Speeches and decisions from everybody involved are easy. The question is the action.
Well, that brings me to your book and your personal story, because it's all intertwined in some respect. You were living at Nahal Oz and your kibbutz there in the south, about half a mile from the Gaza border, on October 7th, when your small community, 450 or so residents in Nahal Oz, were attacked by over 100 Hamas terrorists. Your home was attacked. You and your wife and your 2 young daughters were hiding in your safe room until your father, a general, a former general in the IDF, actually drove for hours with your mother to rescue you. It's an incredible story that you detail quite brilliantly and captivating as a read in and of itself. But what you've done differently in this narrative is that you've also connected it to the history of the kibbutz itself, the kibbutzim across Israel, and that project going back to its origin in the early 1950s. Why did you decide to tell the story this way?
Well, emerging from the tragedy of October 7 and what happened specifically in my community, a kibbutz, you can look at it like a small town or village. So I'm part of a community where 450 people were living on October 7. And 15 were murdered on that day. That's 3% of the population. Try to imagine a village or a small town in this country losing 3% of its population in such violent, terrible circumstances in one day. And on top of that, 7 of our people were taken hostage on that day, kidnapped into Gaza. Thank God, 5, all the women and the girls, were released in November, thanks to the hostage deal orchestrated by President Biden in the early weeks of the war. And we still have 2 friends in the hands of the enemy as we speak, Omri Miran and Tzachi Idan, fathers of young children. And I felt I had to write this story, and to write it first of all in English to an international audience, because I wanted to tell the world what happened to us on that day. But then I understood that I also had to tell the readers of this book not just what happened, but where it happened and who are the people that it happened to. And that's why I decided to write the book with these 2 parallel timelines. The timeline of October 7 that begins at 6:30 in the morning when a barrage of mortars is launched at my neighborhood, and the timeline of the history of our community, starting from its foundations in the early years of the State of Israel. And through the history of the kibbutz, I also tried to tell the history of Israel and Gaza, because it's a history of war, but also of attempts for peace, and a history of enmity, but also of neighborly relations. And I tried to tell all that in the book. And the 2 timelines toward the end of the book converge when the history arrives at October 7.
They converged tragically on October 7th. 15 members of your community were killed that day. As you said, 7 were taken hostage. 2 still remain in Gaza, along with 101 hostages there. We've seen the human suffering there and the tragedy inflicted on that enclave over the course of this last year. But I tell everyone that this book also offers some hope. In this history, I learned a lot about the cooperation, the friendships, the joyous gatherings between Gazans and members of your community, and your message is if it happened once, it could happen again. Obviously, hard to tell that story right now when we are covering perhaps yet the opening of another front. But Amir Tibon, it is a fantastic read. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, and let's do everything we can to get our people back, get a deal, and bring them back alive. This is what we need at this moment more than any other action.
Yes, thank you so much.